before we dive into, how it went and everything like that, just kind of set the stage for what Job Site Ready is for anyone listening that might not know.
In-person classes are starting back up at CEDIA, but the Job Site Ready class that I got to attend was facilitated by our Senior Director of Technical Education, Steve Parisi. He did a fantastic job, both in the classroom and in our lab, of getting the 8 students that we had in the classroom up to speed on the real basics.
Welcome into the Independent Thinking Podcast. This is your host, Rob Stott. In the custom integration space, we often talk about how the high tide raises all ships, and specifically that phrase is often used around the idea of education and training and making sure that, whether it's integrators have access to the programs they need or the training and education for their techs that enables them to be efficient and, do the job right for their customers. It applies to all of the above. And recently had a chance to sit down with Jon Rehwaldt, the new director of curriculum for CEDIA, who started, just a few months ago. He's got about 6 months under his belt, diving into the space, new to the industry, but not new to the world of education and training. And a big asset for that organization as they look to expand what they've been doing and ensure that their education and courses and all the learning opportunities are not only designed and crafted in a way that's efficient for the integrator and providing a strong education, but also that they're certified, that they have they live up to the standards that are expected of certain accreditation bodies and things like that. So John's got some big ideas that we dive into, but also a new program for him. He recently went through the first Job Site Ready training program as a member of CEDIA and got to experience what that was like, the lab that they have set up at their headquarters there for a program that also is going to be going on the road as well. So awesome opportunity to sit down with Jon, see where and how CEDIA is approaching education, which is, we know, a big part of the partnership between CEDIA and our own Oasis brand here at Nationwide Marketing Group, and for our custom integrator members as well. So cool opportunity to sit down with him, and excited to share that conversation with you here. So this is Jon Rehwaldt, Director of Curriculum for CEDIA, here on the Independent Thinking Podcast. All right, we are back on the Independent Thinking Podcast, and excited to, it's not often, if you're watching the video version of this, I don't often get matched in headphone game. So I'm excited to have someone on who can, live up to it and wear a pair of over-ear headphones.
I mean, how else are you supposed to do
right?
audio recording?
If you're not looking like you're ready for a podcast, I don't understand how I've gotten through. I think this is like episode 191. So nice. How we've gotten through that many episodes without having someone like yourself, Mr. Jon Rehwaldt, Director of Curriculum at CEDIA.
That's
Appreciate you jumping on and, have an interest in really bringing the idea to us too. I love that too.
Absolutely.
For this podcast. So how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. It's really nice to be on. I'm excited to talk about what CEDIA is doing in the education space, particular with Job Site Ready. But this is my first interview as a CEDIA employee, so I'm pretty stoked to do one finally. Yeah,
awesome. Well, happy to have you on our podcast to do that, and lots to dive into for sure. But I want to start with you. Sure. We mentioned a new director of curriculum over there. I talked about it before we went on. 6 months into the gig.
Yeah.
So how has it been? Give us a little background on the role and kind of what you've been doing.
Sure. So I came into the role to work on our curriculum, make sure it was aligned with all of the work that's being done by integrators globally, and make sure we support them in the efforts that are not just happening right now, but the things that are going to happen in the future. How do we anticipate training that integrators are going to need in the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and start working on that now so that we're experts in it and our training is, has been tested and verified by experts before it even hits integrators. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. And, one of the other things is that I'm new to the channel. I've never been in integration, residential or commercial. So it's been a really intense onboarding process as I learn all about the community and what people do. So
So
it's been
you're
great.
you're learning alongside those who are learning.
Yeah,
That's pretty
exactly.
cool. No, that's awesome. And well, so when you get your hands on this education, I imagine so for our Oasis members that might be listening, and even Ellipsis and Azion, we have that they know about the CEDIA connection that we have. Part of their membership with Oasis, they get access to CEDIA. Their dues are covered, which means they get access to all that education. And
Right.
so when you say that you're kind of working with things and planning it out, you're involved with that education as well, right? So all the
Yeah,
classes and the CEDIA Academy, that sort of stuff.
exactly. The online training and the in-classroom training, we're looking at all of it to make sure that it's aligned with what smart home professionals need, and it's a combination of theoretical education like you would get in a classroom, learning about electronics and how these systems integrate with each other and what the user experience is like. And then also the hands-on, getting into a classroom with walls and pulling wires and hooking up
Yeah.
speakers and making sure they sound good. We do all of it. And we do it in a way that is manufacturer agnostic. So you can take the things that you learn at CEDIA Academy or in our in-person classes and then apply that knowledge, that expertise to any manufacturer's equipment,
What's
which is a really unique situation.
It's awesome to, well, first of all, for being new to the industry, awesome to hear like terminology coming out of your mouth is like really good stuff, right? So it kind of goes back to that. It's a conversation that happens in so many industries, and one I go to, and it just happens to fit because I know CEDIA is an association as well. You talk about the bringing someone in that's a professional within the industry, or like a professional within the scope of the work that you're trying to do. So it typically like the top level, right? Like Daryl, for example, like a guy that has association experience, but wasn't necessarily, he had the tie in with the music industry and things like that, but wasn't really in with integrators. It's kind of the same with you, right? So talk about that experience of being like an education professional and sort of
Sure.
the leg up that gives you, and also kind of the work you have to do. Do you find it difficult or maybe not that you find it difficult? How do you get up to speed on sort of the lingo of the industry and kind of what's
Sure.
going on?
Sure. Well, I think a lot of it is just being in it and having conversations.
Yeah.
One of the best experiences that I had was at our CEDIA Expo in Denver. Going to that and having conversations with integrators and owner integrators, with manufacturers and design professionals. All of those conversations gave me a really good understanding of the industry. It's just one of those experiences that you can't really replicate when you're
Yeah.
doing work from home. So that was a really good thing. But the other part of it is I'm just a really, really curious person. And so I spend a lot of my time researching and understanding new things that come onto the market. Anything having to do with automation or smart home, I was already in. So understanding that there were people who did this as a profession, that was news. But most of the technology, I'm pretty comfortable with.
Yeah.
I was a technical director at a K through 8 school for 3 years. So I did networking, I did device rollouts and integration with the phone system. So I've done some of that stuff, but not from the perspective of most of our members. And being curious and interested is where CEDIA and the integration industry began.
Yeah.
What can I do with low voltage wires if I run them all through my house? And that starting point is still a part of the community today. People are interested. They're pushing the boundaries of what's possible and what kind of an effect it can have. I sat in on one of our standards meetings yesterday, talking about how to verify the newly codified standard for immersive audio, RP22. How are we going to measure that? And the conversations are great because these people are experts in their field. They're talking about not just the technology or the science behind sound, but also how do we get people to understand what we mean when we say immersive audio, or how are they going to make sure that new theater they've just designed and installed actually meets the specification in RP22 of a level 3 home cinema. And that kind of stuff is just great. It's great to be a fly on the wall and watch those experts talk.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
pretty great.
you had a lot of that in at CEDIA, right?
Oh yeah.
So to be able to experience those conversations and be in the middle of them. Anything, I obviously having interest in and background interest in the space and it, anything that kind of struck you is like surprising about this industry so far in these past 6 months?
Yeah. I think that one of the things that I expected coming in to the industry would be that there would be a lot more mid-market firms, people reaching the middle class who want to have a nice setup for their AV system, but weren't necessarily looking for a home cinema. And there are lots of integrators doing that work, but less than I expected. And some of the other things that I assumed would be default standards like lighting are things that some integrators are just getting into. So I'm really excited to be able to start working on classes about lighting and classes about networking, because those are the things that integrators do on a daily basis. But giving them access to training lets them do it faster, easier, with less cost. Those things are really interesting and rewarding too.
You're in a cool seat too, because education is like, it's similar to like the technological side, right? Like we see all these advances coming and new product launches, things like that. On the education side, you kind of get the perspective of, hey, here's where things are going and how do we train you to be prepared for them. So maybe less like, hands and cables and things like that, but really, yes, you are, because you're doing the training and education around that. It's a really cool perspective for you to kind of view the industry.
Yeah. And the other part is we have a really big responsibility to our members to not waste our time building coursework that they don't need or want. So a lot of the conversations that I've had in the last 6 months are, what do we have from the past that can be refreshed, updated, and presented in a way because people need it? Right. And what do we have nothing on that we have to build from scratch because the industry is demanding it? And those conversations are really interesting too, because when you have those conversations with a budget involved, things get real pretty quickly. When you're speculating, when you're talking about what's cool, what's interesting, that's a different kind of conversation. So that constraint makes it a little bit more of a challenge, but I love challenges.
No, that's awesome. Well, one thing I know you just recently are coming out of is, was it your first job site ready program so that you ran through? So first, before we dive into how it went and everything like that, just kind of set the stage for what job site ready is for anyone listening that might not know.
So it was my first job site ready, but we've run these classes before. In-person classes are starting back up at CEDIA. We're making those available in various locations around the US, so keep an eye out for them. But the job site ready class that I got to attend was facilitated by our Senior Director of Technical Education, Steve Parisi. He did a fantastic job both in the classroom and in our lab of getting the 8 students that we had in the classroom up to speed on the real basics. What do you need to know to leave the classroom and go do this job? The vast majority of what technicians do is labor. It's pulling wires, it's terminating cables, it's installing speakers and building racks. So those are the skills that the job site ready class focuses on. And in the space of about 3 days, you not only get the classroom, but you also get hands-on in our lab, and you get to build an audio system and do some door and window sensors and hook it all up to make sure that it works. And that's a really rewarding experience. The classroom stuff is good for understanding why we do it, but the hands-on gets these folks prepared to go out and do their job, at the same time understanding why they're doing it in the way that they're doing it, not just doing it because they were shown. And that's kind of the difference between training and self-training. We really focus heavily on making sure that techs are professionals. They have the knowledge to make a decision on the job site, not necessarily that they have to call their boss every 10, 20 minutes because they need to know the right way to do it for this particular job. They should be
Right.
able to look at a chart and install the equipment
Yep.
and have it work at the end. And job site ready is one of the best ways to do that. We had a variety of different folks come into that class with a lot of different experience levels, but everybody left feeling like they were better prepared to do their job, and that's
Yeah.
the goal.
Now the lab, talk about that for a second,
Sure.
because I know it's a really cool space at the CEDIA headquarters, and you know, I'm sure that you moved in, CEDIA moved into that building pretty recently, so I know you have the opportunity to do some things in that space and build it out for what you want. And I
Right.
mean, they kind of hit a home run with it, because I only saw pictures so far, so I'm excited myself to kind of get in there at some point and see what's going on, but. Walk us through kind of how that room is set, how that lab, I'm going to call it a lab.
Yeah.
Like you did, how that lab is set up for this course.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have micro houses, I guess you could call
Yeah.
them. They're basically a 4 foot by 8 foot room, and we have 8 of them. And they have full stud walls. They've got drywall on half of them, and they're set up for each class. So we put new drywall up. The students have to come in, and the first day they spend their day running wires in the new construction side, which is bare stud walls. And then on the second day, they run retrofit. So they run behind drywall, having to fish their cables, cut the holes in the drywall correctly for the speakers that they're installing. And so like it's like you're working in a house. You do exactly what you would do on the job site. And it's, what's interesting is we put the students into teams, and they have to work together. They do it all the way through. They plan their system, and then they install it. They have to choose how to run the cables. There's 100 different ways you could do that, but they have to meet a certain spec and try to do it as cheaply as possible with as little cable as possible. And we offer them chances to find creative solutions. For example, one of the door sensors that we have them put in is spec'd to be run with a 4-conductor cable. But if you look at it, you can really do it with a 2-conductor cable. And about half of the students made that choice because they didn't need the extra 2 conductors, and that's just an additional cost. So, they're getting a chance to make the same kind of decisions that an experienced tech would make on site in our lab. And then they walk out and they've already done the job with an instructor standing by who has 20 years of experience as an integrator, and the wealth of knowledge that comes with the CEDIA Academy body of knowledge as well.
Yeah. What's awesome is, it's kind of crazy because we have an example within the membership of Nationwide on the appliance side. And, you hear a lot about delivery and install. That's another, but integrators and delivery and installation of whether it's an appliance or furniture and bedding to an extent, like it's heavy things that you have to move into a house. And, the only way you really get to train is by doing it in the house. Right. So we have a member, Sherman's up in Illinois, not too far from you guys, that, they actually had extra warehouse space where they built a home or like a model of a home that has tight corners and things like that, doors that you have to go through and, try to navigate these appliances, narrow hallways, things like that. Not often do you get to train, those types of employees in a situation where they're not actively in a home that is, a customer's home. So to have a space like that is invaluable. And to see you guys like an integrator, not often that you'd be able to find a space where you can go practice aside from, prior to what CEDIA is offering. Maybe you go to a manufacturer and they have an area set up, something like that. But to have a location where you can, you're learning and you want to do it right, but there's not that added pressure of, man, if I mess this up, I'm really messing up a customer's home.
Right.
Right. So it's cool to see that you have that. And it's a really awesome tool for, to your point, you mentioned it, right? It's integrators of all different experience levels. So it could be brand new up to, what do you think was the most seasoned integrator that was in the room?
We had a couple of folks from an integration firm up in Michigan who had been doing it for 5 to 10 years. Okay. But by that point, they were already on the design side. So they were doing all of the specification and sending out technicians into the homes. So they got a chance to get back into it.
Yeah.
remember what they used to be doing, and then also they have that experience to pass on to new employees. And we had people in there who had been on the job for a week. They had basically done their orientation with one integration firm, and that was it. They had only been into a couple of houses, and that makes for a big gap. But one of the cool things about adult education training is that experience gap is an opportunity for learning. So you can have that experienced employee learning from a new employee as they're going through it for the first time, seeing what they think and what solutions they come to. And at the same time, the experience is available to the new employee from the older employee. That's why a lot of our technician trainers are so heavily experienced in the integration industry.
Mm-hmm.
At least at CEDIA, we want to bring that experience into the classroom.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Now, you mentioned that they have like, there's the example of the, they could wire it a certain way and make a choice, things like that. Do you ever, did you guys throw any real wrenches at them? like any situation, like planned chaos, if you will?
Well, I mean, I think that anytime you're cutting drywall, that qualifies as chaos.
True.
There are some learning moments inside of the curriculum, but the biggest thing is, and this is a thing that throws everybody for a loop, is you can do it however you like.
Yeah, there is no direction, right? Sometimes right? the most chaotic moments are like not when you miss a step, it's when there are no steps and you have to make that decision for yourself.
Yeah. Getting started is definitely the hardest part. And it's interesting to watch that process happen in the job site ready classroom, because the teams will go into the space and they'll stand there for a good 20 minutes just looking, trying to figure out, put their head into the physical space and think about the way that things are going to go together. But that's integration as a whole too. Integration as an industry is creative solutions. That's why it's a very rewarding place to work, because 10 different technicians would approach the same task in 10 different ways, and have reasons behind it, good reasons, justification, and a clear thought process. So training technicians to have access to all of those tools is something that we're really, really working on at CEDIA.
You mentioned this a little bit too, and I kind of want to give you a chance to dive in a little deeper. Obviously there's a range of the experience level, but is there, and maybe it's designed to not be geared towards a specific level of integrator, but who would benefit most from attending one of these job site ready programs?
I think that the primary focus is new employees. But at the same time, anybody in the sales cycle for automation could benefit from it. In fact, we had a couple of salespeople and a couple of office people come through the course that I sat through. And one of the benefits to the organization for doing that is just giving people who do sales the context for, why are we putting this equipment into this house? It's not just that this is what the client wants to pay, but also this is the experience that they want to get. So getting office folks, sales folks, even administration folks into this kind of a class gives them perspective on the job that they're ultimately doing, which is creating an experience for the customer in their home.
Yeah, it's unique. I mean, because how often do you think an office person, if they had no experience in integration to begin with, it's kind of a unique thing, right? They probably have never seen someone running cables through a wall or having to, make cuts and things like that, and wire a smart doorbell, right. Like, so as simple as that, right?
Yeah.
So to be able to see that in person, how it's happening, it gives them a little more context about kind of what they're doing, right? What kind of office they're sitting in, the people that are behind the projects that get completed and stuff like that.
Yeah, it gives everybody a better understanding of how that all works, and that just helps your organization do a better job of serving customers.
What's the biggest thing you learned coming out of that program?
I think that I'm not an audio guy. I'm not a like cinema audio guy. I don't know enough about it. So one of the things that I did not even think of was we installed speakers in the stud wall without drywall, and we also installed them in the drywall. But those speakers are designed to be put into drywall. So if you listen to the non-finished speakers, they don't sound anywhere near as good as the ones in drywall. And I had never even thought about that the speaker's cabinet, so to speak, is the wall.
Yeah.
That blew my mind. I was not expecting it.
Interesting. That's cool. So it's awesome to see that you're like learning along the way as well. It's so cool. But
Yeah.
no, neat. So what do you kind of see? I know, again, your first time coming out of it and still really new in the role, but as you're getting your hands on these programs and watching them happen, what's kind of your vision? What do you see kind of moving forward for whether it's job site ready or just the other education that you're involved in right now? What's sort of what's Jon's vision for CEDIA education?
One of the things that has been kind of central to a lot of our conversations is how do we anticipate what smart homes are going to look like in the future? And that's what gets me really excited, because when we talk about aging in place or multifamily living units, when we talk about the future of housing, integrators become an integral part of that, because now we expect that houses are not just solidly built and safe and repairable, but that they meet a variety of other needs that we didn't used to have. We need our houses to be workspaces. We need them to be classrooms. We need them to be entertainment spaces. And while they may have fulfilled those functions in the past, technology is now an integral part of that. Even just post-pandemic working situations are enough that people are remodeling their home offices so that they have lighting and sound and appropriate screens for the work that they're doing. So I think that as we start to figure out how integrators fit into the smart home of this 21st century, a lot of that is going to be outside of what we've been used to doing for the past 50 years, which is a lot of home cinema, a lot of AV, and security systems. We're going to be looking at a lot of disparate and new ways of looking at how people live in their homes. And integrators that are talking about the future of the industry are talking about that.
Well, it's for those watching the video version, the juxtapose of you talking about the future of technology, and then to have a Dune poster over your shoulder is pretty awesome. So who knows what kind of society we'll be living in?
Who knows?
But you'll have the education for it. I know that much. So, no, that's awesome, man. We appreciate the time. It's cool to get that perspective and hear from you and see how you're learning too. I think that's a really cool part of this for me, is to kind of see how you're diving in head first and really tackling this industry from a new perspective and a new probably appreciation, I'm sure too.
So, I'm excited to be here. I've enjoyed it for the past 6 months, and I'm looking forward to doing good work in the future.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate it. I'm sure this won't be the last time we have you on the podcast. So looking forward to future conversations.
Thanks very much, Rob.
Yeah, you bet. Awesome. And thanks again to Jon. Just a cool opportunity to chat with someone new to the industry in terms of custom integration, but not new to training and education, and clearly has a passion for the technology and this space as well. So neat to see, sort of, like I said during the conversation, neat to see him learn alongside the integrators that he's trying to educate. So appreciate him taking the time. And as always, appreciate you listening to the Independent Thinking Podcast, and we'll catch you next time.